Welcome back to another Castle Nathria card review. This one's a big one. The arena reveal stream was earlier today, so a bunch of common cards, but still some stuff that's really intriguing for standard format. But also this priest legendary that got revealed earlier today. This one is pretty wacky. The Harvester of Envy, a 3-mana 4/3. After you play a card copied from the opponent, steal the original. So we always talk about like thief priests, which usually just means copying stuff, but this actually allows you to convert your copies into actual stolen cards. So what this means is, say you play a Thought Steal. Thought Steal is not currently in standard format, but it's the most recognizable classic card that copies things. You're going to copy a couple cards from your opponent. If you then play those cards while Harvester of Envy is on board, remember this is a card text-based effect. He has to be in play. This is not like this game or anything like that. So while Harvester of Envy is in play, if you copy a Flame Imp for your opponent and then play that same Flame Imp, you can steal one from them. Now it can be in 3 places and this will still work. If it's on board, say you copied it earlier in the game from their deck and then they drew it and played it, you can actually steal it on board. This will mind control units. So if they played that same Flame Imp, you're going to take it. Now, there's a possibility they played their other Flame Imp. That is not the one you copied. This is not based on card names. This is based on objects. So there are 2 distinct independent Flame Imps. But if it's the same one, you can steal it on board. It actually works, been confirmed by devs. Alternatively, of course, if it's sitting in hand, you can steal it, or most likely probably is that it's still sitting in deck and you can steal it from their deck. And just to clarify, if you steal it from hand or deck, it's going to be added to your hand. It's not automatically in play. It's only if you happen to have that minion in play exactly that you mind control it. Otherwise, it's just a resource in hand. But in all cases, you take the same Flame Imp that you copied. So you both get an extra resource and you deny them of that resource as well. Now, Flame Imps probably aren't the most compelling or exciting example in this case, but if they have like some big legendary, for instance, you're gonna copy their legendary. As soon as you play it with Harvester of Envy on board, you're gonna steal their legendary, which might be disruptive for combo pieces. Just take some big value card out of their hand. Could even take and steal their hero card. If it's cheap enough to be played alongside Envy, that might be a viable option on turn 10. Play a Rokara with Envy and the Rokara is gone. So you get to be Rokara and they don't. Now, that note is maybe part of the problem I have with this card, is that you have to play Envy out at the same time, which means often there's going to be a lot of problems getting all of this done in a single turn. If you copy a Rokara early in the game and you want to steal theirs, you might have to wait until turn 10 to make that happen, with Envy kind of just sitting there dead for a long time. And the Rokara, maybe you don't get to play it on 7 because you want to wait to greet it with Envy, and then maybe they draw the Rokara by then and they play it, and once they've played it, you can't steal Rokara. That is not like minions that can be stolen. So there are all these kind of timing and awkwardness challenges because Envy needs to be played, needs to be on board. It's not a card that's going to be easy to keep alive across multiple turns. So you've both got to hit the right kind of targets, because often you're going to hit the Flame Imps of the world that suck and aren't exciting to steal and you don't really care. And they would have been at the bottom of your opponent's deck anyway half the time. They never would have drawn those cards. So stealing them is not exciting, really. So there's a challenge of hitting the right sorts of cards. There's the challenge of getting all of this done in time before they play the cards anyway, or the cards might already be dead, so you can't even steal them from board. So there's the challenge of all the mana that you have to squeeze into a single turn to make it work. There are a lot of problems for this card. It just feels like you're going to have to line up too many different pieces to get this to work in a really compelling way. It's going to be just awkward to get in and often just going to whiff, whether that's from card quality or just timing standpoints. I think it'll fail in many cases. Yes, 1 out of 10 games, it'll steal some awesome win condition and it'll be a super fun highlight. I don't know if that's enough to make this a card you run in your deck reliably. Beyond that, you have to run copy effects. You have to commit at least a little bit of your deck to actually supporting Harvester of Envy if you want. Now, they can possibly print really well-targeted copy cards that say, like, copy your opponent's hero card, and it's like, oh god, okay, that's a lot better. Or copy their highest cost minion, and maybe that eats like a Jace, and you know that you've got some way to steal a win condition. But even then, Jace is a terrible example because that's an 11 mana combo to play with Harvester of Envy. That's really hard to do. So even in those scenarios, you could still see some problems lining up for your Harvester of Envy, and those cards don't exist as of yet. So a lot of challenges for this one, basically. Long story short, fun effect, cool meme, potential disruption, but a lot of problems to overcome means I don't really think Harvester of Envy is a card we're going to see a lot outside of people like me playing it because it looks super fun to steal my opponent's stuff. All right, next here we have the Maze Guide, a 2-mana 1/1 neutral with Battlecry, summon a random 2-cost minion. So you're going to get an average 2-cost stat line, an extra 1/1 here on the front half of this, which, you know, a couple bodies sounds reasonable for infused decks. You're going to need to pump a lot of minions in if you want to pump up your infused cards. There's also some evolve synergy here, potentially, where you're getting a small 2-drop. You maybe turn into a 3-drop or a 4-drop with Shaman evolve cards, and you get 2 bodies for some of those AoE evolves. That seems reasonable. That said, I have to imagine most decks are going to find more consistent ways to go wide on board than a card like this one. It doesn't go especially wide. It doesn't scale up especially well. It's not great at a default level either, because on average, the 2-drop you summon is probably going to be something synergistic, or the stats aren't going to be that great. You're just not going to care about it that much. So you're going to get like 2 kind of mediocre bodies here. So is this good enough to feed, infuse, or evolve decks better than other cards? I really doubt it. I don't see a lot of life here for the Maze Guide. Next up is Natural Causes for Druid, a new 2-mana nature spell. It deals 2 damage and summons a 2/2 Treant. And yeah, this looks solid to me. We've seen this 2 damage breakpoint work pretty well for 2-mana spells in Mage. Over and over again, there are some decent spells there. Stuff like Runed Orb comes to mind. And in this case, you're not getting value generation for Druid, you're getting a Treant, and a little bit of tempo is nice. And for any deck that cares about Treants or tokens or infuse, this might be a nice way to fill some of that early mana, react to your opponent's board a little bit while still developing some minions of your own to pump up your infused stuff. On top of that, being able to go face for cards like this is always nice. Sometimes just having that little bit of extra reach and finishing potential can go a long way, and perhaps even has some utility in like OTK decks as well. Pumping this up with spell damage could be a nice bonus. And I need to stop saying the word pump so much. This review is pumped. Next up, we got a pumped up Sludge Belcher. It's the Bog Beast. He's a 6-mana 3/6 with Taunt, and Death Rattle summon a 2/4 Muck Mare with Taunt. So this is literally Sludge Belcher. Just added 1 mana, made the Death Rattle Taunt a little bigger, and got 1 health also. And I just don't think this is good enough in modern day Hearthstone. Sludge Belcher was great in its era. Yeah, I loved it. But this being a little more expensive and only a tiny bit better in regards to stats just doesn't make sense to me. When you even compare this to something like Mountain Bear, it's like really apparent how this falls a little short. Now, Mountain Bear 7 mana, obviously, but it does a lot more. Bigger base stat line. 2 minions instead. It's a beast for Druid, which obviously matters, or for Hunter, which obviously matters a ton. This doesn't really satisfy any of those conditions. So although this is a Death Rattle minion, it has Taunt, there are some interactions there occasionally in Hearthstone. I just think this is not going to make the cut. This does not feel like it keeps up with modern day Hearthstone well enough at all. Moving on here to the Muckborn Servant, a 3-drop for Paladin. It's a 2/4 with Taunt and Battlecry Discover a Paladin card. So we've had so many of these 3-drops that are kind of like little speed bumps you're just happy to play on turn 3, and they discover you a thing for later. And that's worked pretty well for a lot of these different cards. Venomous Scorpid comes to mind as a classic neutral example. But for the Muckborn Servant here, this is Paladin cards you're getting specifically, which can actually be pretty nice. Limiting the pool to Paladin means you're going to have higher quality class cards on average, maybe get extra copies of really powerful cards as well. On top of that, we've had some pure Paladin stuff teased, or at least soft pure Paladin, where you're really encouraged to play a lot of Paladin cards. That's giving you a 2-for-1 there. Could be a nice way to add some consistency to that deck. But even beyond that, any deck that's a little bit slower tends to love these cards. The fact that this has Taunt means like a control deck can toss this down on 3, get in their way of their opponent a little bit, force a couple of, you know, maybe suboptimal trades, slow them down a little, maybe save 4 to 6 health on average or something if some 3/3s have to run into this, while still advancing your value game plan. So I think Muckborn Servant looks like a totally fine card that there will probably be some decks that find room for. Next up, here's the Batty Guest for Hunter. It's a 1/1 for 1 mana with a Death Rattle, summon a 2/1 Bat. And when I think about exciting infused cards, this looks like a good infuse enabler card to me. As opposed to that 2-drop, that is kind of lame, but this one is really packing a lot of stats into a 1-drop. This has that classic, possessed villager feel, but the 2/1 on the back half is especially nice. Really good stat output here in total for 1 mana, and great for infused style decks, great for Death Rattle synergies. There's a lot of things this card does. You know, this doesn't have the like immediate aggression of a lot of 1 mana cards we see in Hearthstone today that scale up. Think about like Vicious Slither Spears. So it's a little more delayed, it's sitting back a little, but it still has a lot going on, and it's still going to be annoying for opponents to deal with. That 2/1's going to get kind of stuck out sometimes and just hit for 2 a couple times. That's going to feel pretty good, I think, for the Batty Guest. So still a lot of ways to use this card well. All right, next up here we have the Frenzied Fangs, also for Hunter, a 2-mana spell that summons 2 2/1 bats, and if you infuse 3, you'll give them +1/+2, so they move up to 3 3s in that case. I'm really good at math. Now, 2 3/3s for 2 mana, that's a very efficient play. That sounds pretty awesome. That's rarely going to happen on turn 2 because it's going to be very difficult to infuse 3, I think, by turn 2. So more often you might see this is something you fill in like on turn 3 with 1 mana play, or more likely probably even turn 4, turn 5, slot it in to help fill your mana and build out a pretty nice board. It's also cool that this gives back to other infused cards because you're getting 2 units here for a single card that's going to help you move to your next infuse and make sure you keep the infused chains rolling for future cards. So pretty good utility card, I think, for an infuse style deck. Now, I'll also say, I don't know if this is totally terrible if you just play this on turn 2 unbuffed. You're less excited about it, obviously, but sometimes just getting a couple minions aboard as an aggressive hunter list and maybe just hitting for 4 with these because your opponent didn't have a good easy answer, that might be enough, especially if they're still giving back to other infused cards as they die later on. So the floor on this one's kind of okay for me, and then the upside's pretty high with these 3 3s. This looks like a more solid card than I expected at first glance, but I can see both of these feeding really nicely into some sort of infused tokeny hunter list with a fair bit of aggression. Next up here, we have the Forensic Duster, a new 3-mana 3/4 neutral battlecry. Your opponent's minions cost 1 more next turn. So nice little disruption card. Reminds me a bit of Cult Neophyte of old. You'll remember Cult Neophyte made spells cost 1 more next turn. Now, that said, Cult Neophyte was everywhere. It was super insanely good. I don't think the Forensic Duster lives quite up to that level, but I think it has still some potential to show up in a deck here and there. Namely, disrupting spells is usually more valuable in Hearthstone because those are the reactive things. Those are often the lethal presenting things. So you could break up combo decks. You could stop removal cards with things like Neophyte. Build a big board, drop the Neophyte, stop your opponent from playing a Brawl on curve, for instance. This, I think, has less opportunity to protect your board or really disrupt your opponent's plans. Very often, they might still just be able to play all the spells they care about, react to you. It doesn't really matter much. So what is this used for? Just a little bit of curve disruption for your opponent. I don't think that's going to be worth it in most cases. Most decks want to run their own game plan, be as efficient as they can, not kind of try to disrupt their opponent. So refined decks will say, I don't need the Forensic Duster. I'm just going to run a 3-drop that makes me do the thing I like a lot. Make the opponent figure it out as opposed to trying to solve problems that don't quite exist yet. That said, I could still see this existing as like a specific meta answer. If there's some deck that is going to pop off with crazy, you know, to the front minion discounts and OTK you, this could be dropped preemptively the turn before, disrupt their combo, slow them down, buy you a turn, etc. So this is a possible inclusion. I just think it's one of those fringe cards that shows up every now and then as opposed to a card that's in like every deck, like it seemed like Cult Neophyte was for a while. Next up, we have the Sketchy Stranger, a new 2-mana neutral. It's a 2/2 battlecry. Discover a secret from another class. And yeah, I think it's actually surprisingly good. First thing that comes to mind is Rogue. We've already got a Rogue secret synergy card teased. This could fuse secrets and the Thief Burgle package together, where you're getting secrets also from other classes to fuel your own secret cards, but also to fuel your tests and so on. So that's a very natural fit. But even beyond that, I think there will be some classes that are just looking for a little extra value generation that are happy to play a Sketchy Stranger in that kind of wand maker vein of old. Sometimes just getting a surprise card, and you can also fit your curve really nicely in many cases because you'll hit a mage card secret on turn 3. That might be a viable option for a lot of decks. So I think this has a shocking amount of both specific deck fit and just general utility as well. The Sin Runner is a new 5-mana 6/5. What a crazy looking card. He's a beast with Death Rattle, destroy a random enemy minion. So of course, Death Rattles and beasts coming together, you think about Hunter pretty immediately, sometimes Druid as well. That said, I don't really think this is going to make the cut in standard format too often. The random enemy minion aspect is really shaky these days. There are often a lot of wide boards your opponent can generate. Not to mention, when you just kind of plop this down with the Death Rattle, very often they're going to get to dictate when this dies, trade in the things they care about. So it's kind of got that like Sylvanas aspect where sometimes Sylvanas would just get very easily countered on board, but it's much easier to answer than something like an OG Sylvanas, and I just don't know that that keeps up enough in modern Hearthstone. It is a 6/5. It's aggressive, you know, you can plop it down and hope that it gets a hit face or take a really cool trade here and there, but I just don't think most decks are going to be able to afford that slot in the deck when more impactful, more immediate, more directed things are going to fit much better in most cases. And then next up, this is a crazy card. This is a hunter card. It's a rare, but it's like super intricate and amazing, and it looks and feels like a legendary almost. We've had some legendaries that weren't half as cool as this card. This is the Spirit Poacher, a 2-mana 2/2 with Battlecry. Summon a random dormant wild seed, and a wild seed is one of these 3 animal companion type minions. The Fox Spirit Wild Seed is 1 mana. It's dormant for 1 turn, and it has Rush when it pops up. So that's a nice little reactive tool. Take a nice little trade on the next turn. You've got the Bear Spirit Wild Seed. It's a 2/5 taunt. It's dormant for 2 turns, so it takes a little longer to activate, but you get a bigger minion. And then finally, you've got the Stag Spirit Wild Seed, which looks awesome. It's dormant for 3 turns, but when it awakens, it's a 5/4 that equips a 4/2 weapon. So, I mean, really, any of these are a pretty good amount of value for a 2-mana card. You're not paying for these. Remember, they're just getting summoned for free. So you're getting a couple bodies. Worst case scenario, I think might be the Bear Spirit. It's more total stats than the Fox Spirit, but takes a little longer and the effect doesn't feel great to me. I think sometimes you'll just want the Fox Spirit to trade in, maybe work with Infuse more quickly, but the Stag Spirit's just a lot of stuff. It takes a while, but if you're planning the game to go 3 turns, getting a free-ish 5/4 with a 4/2 weapon to boot is kind of insane for a 2-mana card. I don't know, this looks good to me. You're getting something immediately, unlike most dormant cards where they do take a while. You're getting the 2/2 right away. That's not terrible in most cases. And then a really good card potentially down the line with the Stag Spirit. This is kind of intriguing, you know, and it kind of holds up late in some cases thanks to the Fox Spirit Wild Seed. And it's like, if you got 6 or 7 mana, like, yeah, you may not go long enough to get the Stag Spirit Wild Seed, but you still got the 2/2, might be easy to flex into a turn. And that 4/2 weapon on the Stag Spirit, if it's late in the game, that still sometimes can present like a lethal out. You find that 4 damage off the Stag Spirit, you're really happy, even if it took a while to get it. So, I mean, obviously best on turn 2. The earlier you get this down, the better. It falls off a little bit late, but I don't think it's totally stranded late. I think there's still a little potential here with a Spirit Poacher. So, I don't know, this looks like a really strong card to me. I like it a lot, and it's just cool. All right, next up here is the Famished Fool, a 5-mana 3/5 with Battlecry. Draw a card, or if you infuse 4, you're going to draw 3 instead. And yeah, for that infused state, that's pretty good. 5-drop that draws 3 is a nice little fill in. It's kind of got that Gorlock Ravager vibes. That draws 3 Murlocs, but this just draws any 3 cards. So you could kind of see this as a general utility card draw. Like, man, I don't really know how I need some card draw on my deck. I don't really have a lot of good options on a class basis. Maybe I put in the Famished Fool. Probably makes the most sense with decks that are a little bit more aggressive as a bit of a reload, particularly if you want to infuse it. You might need a lot of minions. So something like some of the Token Hunter stuff we've seen could lead into this rather well as a way to reload cards. It does have that, you know, top deck. I'm leaving it in. I'm leaving it in. It's got that top deck risk of infused cards, but since it draws a card at a base, it's not necessarily that terrible of a top deck. You're not going to be pumped about it. I'm leaving it in. I'm leaving it in. You're not going to be that excited about it, but it's still okay. You're going to get a cycle and a body on board. A 3/5 isn't the end of the world for your 5-minute turn if you're just trying to get to that next wave or find that burst damage, that final little push you might want to end a game. So I think Famished Fool has a little utility. Not every deck's going to need this. It's, you know, only going to slot in here and there is the best card draw option for that rare deck. So not an everyday card, but still one with some utility. Next up's the Bibliomite for Demon Hunter, a 2-mana 4/4 Battlecry. Choose a card in your hand to shuffle into your deck. So the Millhouse Mana Storm stat line returns a 2-mana 4/4. Your downside here is that you have to shuffle away one of your cards. So you give up some card advantage here in order to gain some immediate tempo on board. And you know what? I actually think Demon Hunter is the right class for this kind of card. They don't have hard times reloading their hand in Demon Hunter, and in particular, they can also just get some really aggressive starts. And a 4/4 out early, punching people in the face with plenty of reload available to your class means sacrificing that card in hand is probably not as big of a sacrifice as it might be in other classes. And of course, because you get to choose the card in your hand, that means you can pick the thing that is kind of least impactful or least curve fitting, get rid of the thing you don't need for the matchup, and still take advantage of the stat line here. Unlike, say, discards, which might get rid of something you really wanted, the choice makes a big difference for the Bibliomite. Now, my real question for this is not the question you might expect, is a 4/4 good enough? don't know. Demon Hunter already plays some pretty crazy minions. If you think about what they're doing on turn 2 right now, it's a 2/1 that summons a couple 1/1s. That's a lot of minions and a lot of stats. And this doesn't necessarily look like the right shape for any sort of infuse lines either. So this is a bit of a different direction than you might expect you'd want for Demon Hunter, which might be encouraged to play token cards, wide boards instead. So is the Bibliomite the right shape or even big enough to keep up with other things that are already happening in Demon Hunter? I have some questions there. In combination with this downside, it might not be enough, but still a big aggressive card. I don't actually see it in this meta with infused cards, but I think there will be a deck somewhere along the way that finds room for the 4/4 Bibliomite, because there will be metas where that 4 damage probably matters and makes a lot more sense, killing something early, for instance, or just creating the right shape of pressure where you need a big sticky thing, and then Bibliomite makes more sense. Moving on to the Serrated Bone Spike for Rogue. We've got more of the card spam Rogue support for Draka here. 2-mana spell that deals 3 damage to a minion. If it dies, your next card this turn costs 2 less. And yeah, I think that's awesome. Kind of like Lunar Eclipse for Druid that would deal 3 and discount the next spell by 2. In this case, it discounts any card. It's got to be this turn, but it still discounts the card. And that means you can play minions, for instance, afterwards, like Draka, as we've teased. And also means that this is enabling your location to pump out a lot of cards in a given turn. So you're seeing this archetype come together rather nicely. And of course, it's not honorable kill, thank God. So even if you hit a 2/2, it's still gonna work, unlike all the old honorable kill cards. So a lot easier to actually satisfy this if it dies condition. What I think that means is nice swingy tempo card. It's gonna feel really good to slot into turns. And even if you're not using it to enable your location or your Draka or whatever other card shows up, still probably a really nice way to keep up early. This looks like a very strong card to me that's both an archetype fit and general use. This one's good. And then we have the Suspicious Alchemist, a 1-mana 1/3 for Mage. It's going to discover a spell on Battlecry, and if your opponent guesses your choice, they get a copy. So this is a bit like that Priest card we saw teased really early in the expansion. It's going to work the same way, I presume. And what happens is you make your choice, and at the beginning of your opponent's turn, once control reverts back to them, they will choose, and if they get it right, they'll get a copy, of course. And that's still probably not that bad. I think in many cases, you're going to be picking the spell that's useful for you and is maybe less useful for your opponent. Maybe you want some burst damage because you're an aggressive deck, and your opponent is a control deck who doesn't need burst damage, for instance. Suspicious Alchemist is great. Maybe you're finding secrets. It's synergized with a secret package. Doesn't seem like that'll happen soon, but you never know. That gives us a lot of utility. So just a little 1-drop. This discovering things is good. You don't necessarily need the resource advantage over your opponent if the choice advantage exists for a card like Alchemist. So I could certainly see this popping into some lists as a way to just find more cool spells, more wildfires, things that help you, but don't necessarily benefit your opponent as much. Harvester of Envy is a 2-star card. Maze Guide is a 2-star card. Natural Causes is a 3-star card. Bog Beast is a 1-star card. Muckborn Servant is a 3-star card. Batty Guest is a 3-star card. Frenzied Fangs is a 4-star card. Forensic Duster is a 3-star card. Sketchy Stranger is a 4-star card. Sin Runner is a 2-star card. Spirit Poacher is a 4-star card. Famished Fool is a 3-star card. Bibliomite's a 3-star card. Serrated Bone Spike is a 4-star card, and about as good of a 4-star card as you can get. It's just not the sort of thing that's really a 5-star deck-defining card, but very good, I think. And Suspicious Alchemist is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That's it for this review. Really surprised by the complexity of this, man. It's so cool. But yeah, lots of cards, some interesting designs for sure. Curious which ones of these you think are going to be the best. Do you think Harvester of Envy is actually insane? Is everybody going to play it? Are people going to hate it because it's stealing so many cards? That's actually part of the reason I think it's not going to be that good. I think Blizzard wouldn't make a card like this really good because everybody would be so mad. So I have to believe it's kind of weak just on that basis alone. A little bit of deductive reasoning there. But curious to hear your thoughts. Maybe we're all wrong. I want to hear all that and more in the comments below. Thanks so much as always for watching. And until next time, game on.